Good afternoon and welcome to NAMI Maine Talks. I'm Hannah Longley. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Crisis Intervention with NAMI, and I have some special guest stars today. I'll call you guys stars because you're stars in my life.
Love to be stars.
Yeah. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'll go first. I'm Pat McKenzie, and I am the co-chairperson of the Region 4 CIT committee here with my compadre over here. And I currently work at Kennebec Behavioral Health in Augusta and all over Skowhegan, doing a lot of hopefully good clinical services for people.
Well, not just Augusta. You guys are in Androscoggin County now, and
we are. We just started an MSD team down in Androscoggin, and we have a clubhouse down there, model down there. But yeah, we're kind of mostly Kennebec, Somerset County, but we kind of touch 13 counties now with programs that do a little outlying. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll get into that more.
Great. Thanks.
That's exciting. Less exciting. My name's Kevin Lully. I'm the Chief of Police with the Augusta Police Department. I've been with them for almost 30 years now. Hard to imagine. Starting out as a patrol officer, attending CIT, and just a number of opportunities, leading me to my current position as the chair in the Region 4 CIT Council. We have a very busy department, a very active community, so a lot of the things that come out of CIT benefit us on a daily basis.
Well, and this is where it's wild for me that I've been involved in CIT as long as I have, because both of you have shaped who I am within CIT and as a social worker and stuff like that. Because, we've all worked together for a couple of years.
Just a couple years, yeah. And we were going to say a couple decades almost now. Oh, Lord.
So we were just talking earlier off screen about the 2.0s, right? The second generation that we're already working with. So it's really aging, at least for myself, really aging myself.
I've barely aged.
Like fine wine.
Yeah.
We're doing well.
Okay, that's better.
Fine
that's
wine.
better, yes.
Certainly.
So I really got to know both of you through the CIT program. Right now, NAMI does oversee the implementation statewide with folks who participate in the programming. But really, when it gets started and what CIT is it's a community-based program. Everyone thinks CIT stands for Crisis Intervention Training. It's really Crisis Intervention Teams.
Yes.
And so there is a training component. We do have the 40-hour training. We have advanced CIT classes about various subjects. We have a child CIT. We have a 2-day child CIT that Augusta actually is hosting.
Right around the corner.
Right around the corner. Actually, this month. We're into April now. So this month. But really, when I talk about CIT and the thing that's so critical and the thing that brought both of you into my life, is the program aspect of it. And I think that I always stress that is the most important part, is the fact that really we bring together law enforcement, first responders, with mental health, with community resources, and really bring together and try and build up those relationships in the various communities.
Yeah, it's pretty critical.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't do it. Law enforcement cannot do it alone. And more so, I would say, particularly over the last few decades, we've seen more and more need for law enforcement to not just have skills, but to have support from us in working in the mental health world, to the other first responders and those that are doing ongoing community mental health. CIT is a great catalyst and vehicle to get there. So one of my reasons I commit to it.
And that's one of the things that's difficult when we look systemically at what happens, is that as mental health services dwindle and struggle with funding and struggle with staffing, Kevin, you guys are always on. You're always there 24/7. We have 24/7 staffed programs, but they're not staffed quite the same way you guys are.
No. Law enforcement certainly brings a different dynamic to it, without a doubt. And although we try to stay in our lane most times, this is one of those facets where this is one of those trainings you have to provide. Regardless of what, I know legislature certainly took a proactive stance in the original look at 20%. And that's good, right? They were looking to address, that that same percentage of the population that are supposed to be, either affected or the commonality of mental health and mental illness. But the 20% is just scratching the surface. A community like ours, we respond to probably a couple thousand mental health calls per year. And, we're fortunate. We have a lot of great resources and assets in the community, the professionals. We're just scratching the dermal layer of it. So, when we get there, we collect that, the basic content, and then we're looking for that deferral. Because we know that folks have a lot more experience, a lot more real education and training than we have. And so being able to refer to them is just immeasurable.
Yeah. And just the planning part of it too. I know I really became involved with the Augusta Police Department with your predecessor, Chief Mills, who is now the city manager.
Can't keep him out of it.
No, he's bouncing all around. But I used to drag that poor man to so many different meetings. And I'm like, hey, all of us are working with this one person. Like, how do we all work together? Or we're all working on these community issues. How do we all work together? And he showed up. He showed up with a smile. I did oftentimes, to this day, I know what his and actually your coffee orders are, because I would always promise to bring coffee. That's what I could, that's my promise to you guys when you had to show up. But I was in the crisis capacity and really looking at how do we all work together on this.
Yeah, he's always been very active. A couple of moments ago, I mentioned the 20% set by legislature. That's fine for the statewide need and want. Internally, we had that goal. We always wanted 100%. The closest we ever got, I believe, was 86% of all of our staff that had some kind of an elevated training. It wasn't always CIT, but it was something that was above and beyond the basics of either the academy or what dispatch learned through their CTO training. And again, we're eventually, our hope is that we're still going to get there with changing the staffing, with retirements and things of that nature. We've lost some of that institutional knowledge, but it'll come and it'll come back.
Yeah. And that's the thing, when we look at best practices with CIT, there is we want everyone trained in this advanced level training and certified and all of that sort of stuff. I always say, the research tells us that not everyone is cut out to be a CIT officer. And I always validate that. The police departments need all types of folks. And so it's that baseline level of training that you guys commit to, is that everyone will have some sort of mental health training.
Sure. And
then you guys also, in your participation, you do a really good job with the officers who are certified, making sure that they're designated on, for anyone who does a ride along, you can see they're CIT officers in the CAD system. And so really designating that. And actually, just so folks know, CIT is actually a pretty complicated program. It's not that complicated, but it's comprehensive. Thank you. That's a much better
very comprehensive
way. And as the co-chairs, every officer who attends the 40-hour training now, we've had this in effect for, about 5 years now, I'd say. But every officer who attends the training has to complete an application. And then it is scored by our law enforcement chair, our mental health chair, and then we have a family and peer from the community who also reviews and scores the applications to make sure that the right officers are attending and they're attending for the right reasons.
Absolutely.
Okay, so for full transparency, I'm going to say this because you know that I am that guy that feels that sometimes administrators have to do what they think the officer might need versus what the officer might want, and I'm a gleaning example of that. Not that I have shined in any capacity, but when I was younger, I wanted to go to the boots on the ground kind of trainings, something that would lead to more arrests, more citations, and all that stuff that I thought
more
was
tactical.
real police work.
Yeah,
right.
More tactical.
Because coming out of the academy, that's what everybody thinks police work is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then when you work in a community like Augusta or Waterville or when it's a service community, you realize that you're really using these these associative skills and the ability to have these cognitive links with these folks to be able to assimilate, and really have found that that's probably paid off more in my career than any other training that I had ever attended. And I didn't want to go, but my boss recognized that it was something that I needed versus what I had wanted. So protected me from myself.
Yeah. That is great. You guys too have, and you're a department that I don't want to put you pedestal. But you're one that has fostered a culture of that and shifting the glamorous calls. Is I had one officer say, talk about that, really shifted the importance and the criticalness of mental health to the forefront. And so you've created a culture where your officers want to seek out that training, and you build up through the levels and through the layers of, we're going to start with this, and then we go, with all of that. And so I do have to say, like, kudos to you guys in fostering that culture. But then also you can see it in a lot of the hires that you have coming on in the just acknowledgement and welcoming of it. And so, yes, early on in the CIT program, it definitely was mandated in a lot of departments. But we have been able to shift to it's the officers who want to be there, because you can really, again, see the cultural importance of a department that's been instilled in them. And so that's what has, I think, made so many of these programs, and you guys in particular have such a robust program of just acknowledging the importance and really prioritizing that.
I appreciate that. It all comes back to partnerships. And again, if we're truly doing our due diligence for the community, right, we're supposed to represent the community in its entirety, not the parts that we just agree with or the parts that we think are the most fun, but everybody. So again, our hope is that, as we're getting new officers in as part of that field training, or now it's, police training, it's the same model that, again, Waterville utilizes in theirs, is, we're looking to recognize, if we can, where are the greatest needs. And the greatest need is not to have the fastest driver. The greatest need is not to have the guy that can, shoot a 50 instead of a 49 at the range. It's being able to meet with people and talk to them, on a level that everybody recognizes the worth of the other person in the conversation, empathizing with the needs that person might have at the time. And that might be that maybe they're a mental health crisis. Maybe not. Maybe it's that they just got victimized and you need to assimilate in that regard. But it's providing that overall service throughout the community. So this was something that was put into motion long before I'm the fourth chief in my tenure there, Chief McCamish, Chief Gregoire, Chief Mills, now Chief Lully. And I think that's the tone that's been set for good reason, because of the diversity of our community. But I do thank you, though.
And so, not to call you out, but I think that you probably have been with CIT the longest.
Yeah, for most, myself and Melissa Catine. I'd have to give shout out to Melissa Catine.
Absolutely. I always give...
and Robin Gavin.
I was going to say, I'm going to give you credit right now. I tell everyone this, that Pat was actually my hero growing up, and who the social worker I wanted to be.
So old.
Well, no, but you were, I definitely held you up on a pedestal. You've heard this story before. Just you were who I wanted to, you're who I wanted to be in my career. And I still remember, my husband still teases me about the first time I was at a CIT meeting with you, and you turned and you're like, Hannah, what do you think? And I was like, oh my God, Pat McKenzie just asked what I thought.
Well, I appreciate it. The feeling is very mutual, because your work for advocacy for this and many other projects, but your commitment, and it's a long haul commitment, and that's what I appreciate so much. I did get involved with CIT early on, and like I said, it came to Maine. And I was, I don't think I've ever shared this before, Hannah. I was very driven about CIT being a part. I'd been in crisis services before we even had crisis contracts in the state. We had these little fledgling pilot crisis programs. I happened to be one in a part of the state that I worked very closely with police. And it made all the sense in the world to be working with. I called myself a secondary responder, but I needed my first responder many times in the field. And one of many, many wonderful experiences, but one of the sort of professional and personal shaping experience I had early on was I was involved in a situation where a young man who had very serious bipolar condition, and he was in a very scared state, very manic, as we would say in the business, but he was scared. And he wasn't making a lot of good choices because he really didn't understand the world around him. He really was experiencing a lot of psychosis. He also was a young man that we kind of knew well because his mother was a professional in the mental health field. So police and others, we were there trying to help him to make a decision to come out of his apartment. And the police worked so hard. And everybody worked hard, but it did end up resulting in a police shooting because they had to defend themselves. It probably was what we call those days of suicide by police. It was shaped the rest of my crisis professional life, for sure. So when I had moved later and got involved in Portland, I had this golden opportunity through the Portland police, which, they were kind of early on in bringing CIT in and bringing a few other things. I also was working in a program that had the first real police liaison working for me in the crisis program. So I just landed in the right place at the right time to really embrace this relationship I wanted with law enforcement and my community and the people I serve, which are those who are living with serious and persistent mental illness, so that I could bring this together in a way that I think would make sense of that experience. And it introduced me to a whole lot through CIT, all the learning, but also a new and a better relationship with my partners in law enforcement. And I know we'll talk a little bit later, but my absolute concern for law enforcement and other first responders, that they are always there when it's the worst moment of someone's life. And we have done a really abysmal job in our culture, times not remembering how to care for the caretakers that are the first responders. So, being able to be in a relationship with law enforcement to support them through their hard times just as important. So CIT is always about, it's helping my community members and the people I serve as a social worker, as a crisis worker, whatever I'm doing. But it's also about serving my very beloved partners in public service called law enforcement and other first responders. So it's been great.
And we will kind of, I guess we can touch on it now, but yeah, we can't ask individuals to respond and promote health in their community if we don't promote their health also.
Absolutely.
I go back to frequently, and I think that probably I'm redundant in certain things that I say on our podcast, but when you're in a helping profession, you have an ethical obligation to self-care. And we need to really instill that in so many different professions because it is a lot. It's a lot.
I'll kind of throw myself in front of the bus. We have not done a good job at the police department. We certainly provide an array of services to the community, but culturally, I think that we have just failed ourselves. And as an administrator now, one of the things I look at is exactly that. Hannah, firsthand, we've had a couple officer-involved shootings, while I've been an administrator, and typically within the first 12 hours, you and I have already had at least one, maybe two conversations. How do I, what do I need to set up as we move forward? What are the things that I can expect the staff to go through, having just been involved in that? And how can I help to prepare them to be better suited for self-preservation? One of the things that we do have is a peer support group at the police department. It's staffed with various levels of the organizational chart, so it's not all the bosses, it's not all the boots on the ground workers. It's a pretty good representation, but I think it's that nature that cops they try to be tough guys or gals, and they don't want to talk to people. They don't want to reach out. One thing we were able to bring in this past year was a program called Struggle Well, and it's sponsored by Boulder Crest and the Travis Mills Foundation, and it's originally just provided to military. A friend of mine, our kids played sports together, Dick Golden. He is a retired state trooper, sergeant who was on the tactical team. Another cohort, Jerry Madden, also on their tactical team, were instructors for this program. So we had a conversation about what it would take to bring that to the city of Augusta. And we ended up bringing the 2-day class in. I trained our entire department over the course of a couple of weeks so we could get the different teams. But it was an amazing transformation within the building. I was allowed to stay in the class, and I say allowed because I didn't want to be present if I was in turn going to be a detriment. I didn't want people to not feel comfortable because the boss was in the room. So again, Dick Gold and I known each other for years, so he didn't have a lot of reservations about immediately picking me out in the crowd, making me feel as uncomfortable as possible, but in a good way.
Yeah.
And we knew this was going to happen. And when the class said, no, we want him to stay, it was nice to hear that. But the perspective that it allowed us to have some of the coping mechanisms, as well as some of the identifiers that we've been told before, but something about it being presented in that capacity was just a little bit different, and I think that sometimes makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
How you're going to assimilate to it, and so again, we were able to get the entire department trained, and it makes it nice. So that way, if I happen to be coming in, I'm having a bad day, whether it be personal or work related, because both are equally important. It's helping my coworkers also identify what those cues might be. Maybe I'm not my baseline self. So small step in that direction, but we're hoping to expand and explore greater depths with our peer support as well. I know our Augusta Fire Department have an outstanding. They've been recognized throughout the state a couple times, and so we've had conversations with Chief Groder and Deputy Chief Leach to kind of piggyback on their successes and how we can emulate that.
And that's where kind of Augusta comes in is, well, one, I mean, I've worked with you guys for a really long time.
Right.
I actually had a different name when I first started working with you guys. My hair was, but you in the fire department do a really great job making sure that you're supporting each other, you're supporting the community together. From a CIT perspective, we're talking about the wellness component. I always do laugh because I now added, there was a critical incident and you called and you're like, okay, as we do, what do I need to remind them of? What are all of that? And we go through all of that information. And then I came in to do a debrief. And for folks who don't know, debrief, we'd use the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation SISM model. It's an international best practice, but we use that model. And I came in, they're like, yeah, don't worry. Lully told us to have a steak and eat a salad. And I'm like, have a steak? And they're like, yeah, have a steak and eat a salad. And I'm like, the salad is really good because we know that the leafy greens helps to produce our serotonin production and the fiber and all of that sort of stuff, and drinking water. I'm like, where did the steak come from? And everyone's like, I don't know.
Tastes good.
That's what he's like, well, I thought that you said that. And it's just, it's a good thing to have, like when you're having a bad day. And so that's my standard line. I'm like, drink twice as much water as you think you need. Here's some dietary stuff. Make sure you sleep. And Lully says to have a steak. And everyone's like, who's Lully? I'm like, the Augusta Police Chief. He says to have a steak after a critical incident, and it helps.
A steak can't be wrong. It just can't be.
Yeah. So kind of shifting from that, though. So we have the, and I think we're going to kind of probably go in and out, but you guys have had with the CIT program here with Augusta Fire also, you guys have had some pretty creative alternative responses that have developed over the last few years. I'll take CIT credit for it, but I know it's not me.
It contributes.
But you guys have had some really, you've taken some really great emerging best practices, ideas, and what can be really difficult in Maine is that we, New York City has great programs, or Seattle, and
Seattle.
Yeah, we're not one of those big cities.
That's right.
And so how do we take it and how do we apply it here? And you guys have done, and I kind of want to give space for you guys to have some conversations about some of the cool stuff that you've worked on over the last few years with some of the partnerships that have been developed. And I think that the Bread of Life Shelter has been pulled in and stuff, and you guys have done some cool things. And so...
Yeah, I think that the Augusta Police worked very hard to work with the Options Program through our crisis services around the opioid.
Can we pause and explain what the Options Program is?
Well, I can, and fill it in, too, if I miss anything, because I've been out of the crisis world. I'm back in, by the way, but I've been out for a while. But Options was a program that was funded through our crisis service, specifically to kind of deal with the crisis of the opioid epidemic that we have and the incredible numbers of people at risk for lethal overdose. And so these folks were hired. We certainly could use more, but we got to start, and that was always the hardest thing. We never staff or fund mental health to be the 24/7, 365, like you guys are living that life. And then we come in as partners and then, oh, we've got one person for all of your shifts for every day. But it was a great start, and it has continued, and it's a wonderful program. Big supporter of it. That would have this person who could work with first responders, particularly law enforcement, in our own work to try to start to bring down the numbers of overdose and negative impacts of this. And it Augusta embraced it, and it actually led to a transformation where you have a new position.
That's correct.
At your office, which is super helpful in the world of mental health. So.
Well, it was kind of a combination or derivative, right? Because you're not giving yourself credit because you had brought in Darren Ripley to work with the fire department on Project Recovery. So, kind of in the downtown at Hartford Fire Station, where he's accessible to a lot of foot traffic, a lot of people that visit the downtown. It's a service area as well. It's a great little community, but there's life-saving services that are being provided there every day that people often forget about. So Darren was a great conduit there to kind of bridge, within reason, because we always hear the term HIPAA, right? And so, but bridging that with, the fire department and emergency services, the folks that are in need, we ended up, we got our community response specialist who came from Options, Don Kearns, now works for the city full-time. And we're, fortunate that Options was backfilled with Ashley Kimball. So we actually have two, human assets, which, I can't thank them enough for what they do every day because the contacts that they have, just like when Darren was there, but the contacts they're having are saving lives every day. And it's not a number you can just arbitrarily pick out because you don't know, just like, the people in this room, we don't know who we're going to speak with today, tomorrow, or the next day, and what that impact is going to have. But there's no doubt in my mind, with the outreach that the collective bodies have been having, that this past winter especially was a perfect example that there were lives saved throughout the year because of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I do a shout out for, there's a partnership in this when you're like, I've always been in community mental health. It's my choice to stay in community mental health, and we're part of that community. And then our partners in first responders, whether that's at, EMS or law enforcement. The other one in that particular Project Recovery, was the holy triad, I say, is that city government. The city council actually was the one that went for the funding under, I think Courtney Allen was a big part of Courtney Allen
cornerstone
for the work, and went for this funding, got the funding. It was very difficult during COVID to do anything with it, but they kept at it. And so without that perfect thing of city, whatever your town or city, county government, the servants of whatever form or shape we come in, that we want to serve our community, when we get together and get on the same page, it's amazing what we can do. And we can, those rules those barricades, what are the obstacles in our way, like, HIPAA, or which are rules for the mental health folks and the medical folks. That not necessarily does a law enforcement officer have to live with those, but we can find ways around those, I think, when we all work together, which that's what impressed me about particularly Project Recovery and other things, Options, all of us kind of coming together with all the other community people, Bread of Life and PATH programs for homeless folks and things, that if we all work together, we can get around a lot of the things they think that won't let us do a good job together.
I agree. It's important to have the networking. That seems to be, I always say you don't have to know everybody. You just have to know somebody.
Yeah.
In my, I've got everybody's contact information in my phone, and God bless our cell phones now, right? And so it's so nice that when there is a question or there's a situation that arises, whether it be, with the group in this room, if I need something from the hospital, if I need something from downstate, north, wherever that might be, it's being able to pick up that phone and have a conversation. And so starting these programs together, working through these programs together, it really fosters that networking and that relationship as well. And I truly believe, and I know one of you had said it early on, so I'm plagiarizing it when I say that, it can't be done individually. We cannot operate on an island, and there's plenty of consumers and work to go around. So, it takes a village.
Mm-hmm. And I think for the mental health world, I'm going to take ownership of that. That this is not easy. I think that there's a lot of work we can do on our side about how can we better partner. I'm a pretty big champion for that and always giving voice to it, and why I've stayed working with CIT. A lot of the reason I'm the regional co-chair people is I want that message to be out to the providers of mental health services that it's about us partnering too. And many times we really don't know how to do it. You know, we're busy with our work and it's different. But we really don't know. We don't know about law enforcement. We don't ask the questions because we go, well, they do that, and there's this sort of siloing, and those silos really need to be broken down to really make CIT work like we want it to work, the evidence-based practice it is. And crisis services is one place where that we were able to, and I think that's a lot to do with Hannah, your work, because you were in crisis, you brought forth that. There were a lot of us in the beginning when it first came to the state. It was crisis people all over the state, everywhere, that we were like pushing this. And I think that we have still a lot of work to do in that area. It's high maintenance to bring it in. But I would say that's why we want to push when there's a training for CIT to become part of the CIT team. I push it out to all the crisis teams and say, hey guys, mental health folks, you're on crisis teams, but you would really benefit from understanding more about how to work with law enforcement. And so, and this model is really helpful. I mean, we think we know it all. I kind of know all the mental health stuff. You know, we had to get degrees in it. And sometimes we are pretty good at, some of us, not all of us, that's for sure. Some of us pretty good at stabilizing situations and de-escalating folks. But what we haven't got really good on maybe is getting up and out into more of that field work to see how we can work as a team. So I think that's important for us to own in mental health, that we have to keep trying, keep working it.
That's what I always say, NAMI, we're the accountability partners, and we're the accountability partners for everyone, and really having some difficult and uncomfortable conversations. I've had those with, I always say, well, like my favorite thing with you is every once in a while I'm like, oh, I wonder what shade of purple I can turn his face. And then he has this little vein right here, and once that starts going, I'm like, oh, all right. But
we don't want to talk about the vein. It's a new day.
That's but that's where NAMI holds a lot of it. Right. Is just like, how do we have accountability on every angle of it, and really have those hard conversations and say, the reports from law enforcement are that they're not having a lot of...
The data says.
Because I think that something that's important is that departments who participate in CIT, they make the commitment that their officers will apply and they'll be vetted, and so they won't just send someone as punishment who doesn't want to be there. That you will participate in regular meetings with all of us so that you get to know who's who, and we talk through issues and we talk through uncomfortable. I don't like uncomfortable conversations. I always tell my kids it's courageous conversations. Like, how do we work through that? Those sitting with that discomfort. But we also collect data, because CIT, the overarching goals of CIT is that one, when implemented effectively, when we see the culture change and we see a decrease in injuries to individuals in the community and to officers who are responding, but we also see a huge diversion from higher levels of care. And so that's really one of the big things. And that's one of the things I love about the programs in Augusta, is that you guys have done a great job diverting from law enforcement as soon as humanly possible. And so be it from a call coming in and diverting over from, I don't think you guys are one of the pilot sites for the 988 diversion just yet in your comm center, but I know that that's coming. You guys train your dispatchers and a lot of different stuff. And so you guys call in mental health without that pilot site way earlier than, and I just say that from personal experience from working with you guys for years, but also in implementing, the recovery support in the fire department, because the fire department doesn't have mandatory arrests. And so if we can get them to go out on a medical call, mental health and substance use disorders, behavioral health conditions, they're medical. If we can get them to go out instead of law enforcement, again, we know that if there is a mandatory arrest to be made, you guys don't see it. And I don't say that in we're turning a blind eye to safety concerns, but really making sure that individuals are getting the help and the support and the resources that they need. And I always say in the appropriate system, which is the mental health system, the behavioral health system. And what I think is beautiful through the CIT program is that law enforcement data is now being utilized at different levels to really show the discrepancies and where we do need mental health funding and where can we build in those supports. And people are asking the question saying, what does mental health need? And then law enforcement showing up as some of the biggest advocates for saying you need to fund these services. Absolutely. You need to support mental health services and build a more robust system. And so that to me is like when I think about what the CIT Maine program has accomplished, the partnerships and just the larger system unity and the system change, and then really getting to see, again, I get to see the numbers for the entire state of Maine and really seeing where it's taking hold and the cultural changes in the departments, but also just and people getting the right services that they need to support them in their journey to wellness. And so it's really fantastic. What's been your favorite parts of CIT, or the, kind of the most aha, or the, when I think of CIT, this is the, well, I won't sing.
Well, for me, there's so many, because I started teaching CIT early on, and it was different. Things have changed. And so, but the thing I loved then that I love now, even, and I get to love it more if I get the fortunate to come in and do a portion, a module, or spend a day there, would be when you're working with a group of officers, and somebody in the room just, one of the officers will just like step up and kind of share what their thoughts are about this, and that you can see that that's like almost like a moment where they're kind of getting it, like, oh, and it can be anything, but it really touches me, and this is happening more and more, which tells me something has changed.
The application process.
Well, it's the application. I don't know. I think it's our culture too.
Yes.
I think that law enforcement has been a real front champion for this change. And that is that more and more officers talk about it in their own lives, mental health, mental illness, that they've had a family member, or they themselves sometimes will expose that they've had an experience of feeling really depressed and maybe having a diagnosis. And I mean, that was a rare thing 20 some odd years ago, rare. It was a little bit like I did suicide prevention with military. And also prior to that, it was no one talked about that, because it could hurt. It could make you unfit for duty. Today, I would say I hear more wisdom from officers who share their own stories about people that they've experienced, or understandings of their journey through understanding mental health and the challenges, that how there's so much in life, how what stress does to us, what compassion fatigue, what vicarious trauma is. That just is, I just love being, again, in that place where I think that CIT has been the front line of reducing stigma around mental illness in our culture. And I don't know if they get enough credit for that. So, love it.
I would say I was at the Criminal Justice and Public Safety at the State House, that committee this morning. We were talking about critical incident stress management. We were talking about the fact that the average person goes through 2 to 3 traumatic or critical incidents throughout the course of their lifetime. Officers, first responders, go through 168 to 170 through the course of their career on average, plus those 2 to 3 in their personal lives. And so that can have a pretty significant impact. We know first responders are actually the highest risk population for suicide death. Right. And I do think here in the state of Maine, we've put, and we're developing some better safeguards in those protections, but it is really there, and it's the awareness and just the openness that it's no longer, I always give Augusta credit. I got called in once when you've had officers who have been struggling, instead of being like, we're gonna, you're off duty, we're doing this, we're doing that in a punitive measure. You've called me in before and been like, how do we support this person? What do we do to kind of rally around? How do we do an assessment? Like, how do we get them the resources that they need? And I think that's great. I joke I was part of an underground network back in the day where my cell phone would just kind of quietly gets passed around. It's not so quiet anymore, which is fantastic. Unless you have really fast, what's your like like.
What's your favorite part?
So my favorite part has changed. It now as an administrator, one of my favorite things, I get to have the enjoyable pieces of work. I get to go to the meetings and network in the community, right? So when I'm at council, when I'm in downtown, when I'm in a neighborhood watch meeting, and I have somebody come up to me and say, "Hey, I just wanted to talk to you for a minute. Officer so and so came to my house this week," and sometimes you don't know how this conversation is going to start, right? Yeah. And when they start talking about how they were in a dark place in their life, and having that time with the officer on a one-on-one basis, where they were able to again break down the barriers, have a one-on-one, heart-to-heart, human-to-human conversation, and work together to at least an option for them, and some different resources. Again, those are the ones. Those are my favorite moments that I take away. And of course, I come back and I'll fire off these long emails of the woohoos and and embarrass the officer, because that's usually what happens, right? Because they like, oh, you didn't have to say anything, but like a proud parent, you hear that they did that. And you know behind the scenes that they do it day in and day out. But when somebody takes the time to come over, and have that conversation with you and share that with you, that's absolutely one of my favorite parts of any day.
I sent an email because I got a compliment about one of your officers who's the school resource officer. I was at school pickup and picking up my kid, and he comes up and he's like, "Why are you calling me a sweet boy? I'm not a boy. I'm not sweet. Literally, it was almost one of those, I'm a big boy now." And I'm like, sorry. All right. So as we do that, let's wrap up so Ambrose doesn't get too annoyed with me. Fun fact. Let's end with your fun facts.
Okay. You want to start?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Fun fact. Some people know a farmer, that I have a farm. A lot of people know that. But the fun fact is that I also recently took on this endeavor, and I'm raising very registered, beautiful, called mini Herefords. It's a beef kettle. It's, they're registered. I'm raising them. The mini means they're about 900 pounds instead of 2,000 pounds.
I thought they were the little ones, like the house ones, and I was about to get so excited.
They're registered, and I've been breeding and raising them, hopefully for 4-H calves, because it's my little thing about wanting to find youth or groups that want to bring youth in to raise a 4-H calf. There's nothing more fun than raising bovine, as we say. And it's been really good. I mean, I was an ox drover, so I drove oxen. So these little guys, big old oxen that, are like 3,000 pounds each.
My mind is blown about
working with a 900-pound one, but it's wonderful because it's all about breeding them. So it's about the babies getting born in the spring and raising them up and hopefully finding them a wonderful home. Now, we do know that what they're for ultimately, but for me, I get to raise them to find wonderful homes and, carry on with some kids versus just having that great steak you talked about. But anyways, that's my fun fact for today.
Gracious,
I raised beef kettle.
Why did I choose to go after?
Yeah, that was a poor choice on your
part.
part.
You better beat that. Go, Lolly, go.
So no, I guess my fun fact is I'm outnumbered at home. It's all ladies. I'm the only male in my house, to include our dog, who is a little Shih Tzu, a little female. So there's like zero masculinity, zero testosterone in the Lolly household. But what I'm getting the opportunity to start experiencing right now, is my fun fact, that the 2.0s, I'm getting that the last firsts are coming around. So my daughter has gotten engaged. So we're super excited for her to get married in October. Her and her fiance have bought a home. And though they won't be moving into it until after the wedding, we get to spend the next umpteen weekends just making it theirs. So it wasn't exactly turnkey ready. A beautiful home, but it's amazing to go through this process, with your kid. And her fiance is just an amazing young man. That I'm glad he's a good kid, because he's 6'3", 275 pounds. So I'm glad he's good. But that's my fun fact, is I'm the only boy in the house, and now I am kind of turning wrenches, laying flooring, rewiring their house, and loving every minute.
Thanks so much.
I'm impressed your body can still stand up to it.
Oh,
I'm just saying, like, the leg
let her get away with
No,
that.
I know that, like,
Chief,
for
you can't
me,
let her get away with that.
that would hurt. Like, my knees are starting to hurt just
Yeah.
thinking about it. That's a lot. I'll do my fun fact is that I got super excited when you were talking about mini cows.
Oh yeah, come on over.
No,
When
like
they're
the
born.
mini ones.
Oh, the mini. Oh,
that you can have
on
in the
like
house.
TikTok.
I send videos to my husband all the time, and I'm like, I want one. Can you get me one? He's like, no.
No, mine aren't that little, and they don't look that cute and smell that good either.
Tell Jason to stay
cute.
strong.
Yeah, no, he did look into getting me. I desperately wanted a sloth, and so he did look into that at one point. But you can't have chaos in your house if they need surprisingly, they need a very quiet, calm environment, which my family does not provide. So I do feel like we touched upon so many different things. We might need to have a reoccurring episode. You guys can be reoccurring guests.
I'd love to.
I think it just warmed us up.
Yeah, I know. I feel like you got into it. And so I will say thank you for joining us. And we will be, NAMI Maine at the Sea Dogs will be on May 23rd. And a portion of all proceeds will be going back to NAMI Maine or coming back to NAMI Maine. So please consider going. Again,
Absolutely.
May 23rd, Sea Dogs, hot dogs. There's probably going to be steak there, so Lully can go.
Wow.
But
Right.
I kid and I tease because I love.
That's right.
But yeah, I think we're gonna have to do a part two. Just to,
Absolutely.
we just hit, that was the tip of the iceberg there. So, thank you guys so much for joining us,
Yeah,
and
thank you
hopefully
for
we'll
having
see
us.
you.
Really
Yeah.